another Wake County hero of mine, which is Adrian Phillips. Adrian is going to lead us through some database problem solving. Adrian is from our MTSS department, so she comes with a lot of problem solving skill sets and just taking us through tips. But most importantly, she's going to encourage and help you be better leaders in your departments and your PLTs. So Adrian, I'm going to turn it over to you. Fill our bucket.
Thank you so much, Dina and Jennifer. And Dina, for a second, I thought you were going to say she comes with lots of problems, which is also true right now. But we don't even have time for all of that. But thank you for the introduction. It's hard to go after Jeremy as well because he is amazing and has some wonderful information for you about paraphrasing, which is kind of close to my heart too as a coach. But in order to kind of transition into what we're talking about next, which is assessment data and what is your role in giving assessments in your job as an ELA teacher and as a teacher leader. So we have just a little brain break for you, a little funny video to get you thinking about assessments and giving assessments as a teacher. So I'll let Jennifer roll it.
You say, I missed the joke. Which one?
Am I starting this from the beginning, Adrian?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just, yeah.
Well, they have us out here at 23 degrees. Wicked witch again, Miss Jones. Morning, Tyler. Oh,
Jennifer.
The door's still locked.
Sorry. Don't worry about it. It's not.
You say, I missed the joke.
There you go.
Which one? What's the longest river in the world? What's the longest river in the world? It's asking what year the Louisiana Purchase was. What year? What's the largest and deepest ocean? What's an ocean? Now, which one is the largest and deepest? Think about that. Which one do you think it is? Try it out. Need help? Raise your hand. Question. No, I cannot help you. This is a test. You just finished a 30-minute test in 5 minutes. You need to check your answer.
So I saw a few of you giggle, and it's just funny because it's true. How many of you felt like that lady at some point, just repeating the question in a different tone of voice, like and that's how you're helping the students or whatever. So we've all said probably something like that at some point. It's just kind of funny to see. But really what I want you to think about now is you give the assessment. Obviously, you have a role in administering assessments in your classroom, but much more importantly, what we do with the assessment data is really what makes an impact on teaching and learning. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about assessments that you give as part of your curriculum and how you can respond to the assessment data that you collect. So the three main types of assessments that we're going to be talking about these are your curriculum embedded assessments. And you're lucky, I think, that you have this EL curriculum that already that embeds these assessments along the way for you to be able to tell how your students are doing. So we're going to look at pre-assessments, which are obviously given, and this is something that we've been developing this year for you. I've been part of working with Jennifer and Dina and the team and developing some of these pre-assessments. So this year we've been giving those pre-assessments at the beginning of a unit to try to plan your instructional moves and figure out what students already know, what skills they have, and which skills you might need to put some extra emphasis on during the unit. And then your mid-unit formative assessment, obviously you give those along the way to help make adjustments as needed in your instruction and curriculum environment. And then there's an end of unit or summative assessment that you give to measure your students' performance kind of overall towards the larger standards and to evaluate. You're doing kind of more overall evaluating of your instruction.
Adrian, you muted yourself.
I'm so sorry. I don't even know how I did that except for just waving my hands around talking. I don't know where I stopped, but we're talking about end of unit assessments that you give just to evaluate the overall health of your instruction curriculum environment. You might be looking at things you'll do differently the following year or semester, and then things that you might have to adjust for other modules or units. But I want to draw your attention to also the blue questions at the bottom. Some of you might have your schools involved in the PLC Plus work. That's also work coming through Office of Professional Learning. And these questions come straight from that PLC Plus book. If you are not familiar with that, if your school's not working with PLC Plus, you may have been around in this district long enough to have talked a lot about DeFore, and these questions are very similar to the DeFore questions that we asked. But your first two assessments are figuring out where are we going, where are we now, and then once you're assessing at the end of a unit, it's what have we learned. And I think the most important question that sometimes gets forgotten, or when you're short on time, is the question that you don't focus on as much sometimes, is who benefited and who did not benefit from the instruction. So we're going to talk about that today, really how you can dig in and figure out which students are benefiting the most from your instruction, curriculum, and environment. All right, next slide, thanks. So I'm going to give you a minute. Well, let me talk to you about what this is. I think Jennifer shared it with you already, but there is a PLT guidance document for database problem solving. I know the title of this is really a mouthful, but it's that document that helps you with problem solving on your assessment data. So this is created with MTSS coaches, some other people from academics, and even some people that support PLTs in the Office of Professional Learning, as some just guidance to help teachers when they're together with their PLT, or even sometimes people don't have a PLT and they have to do this individually, but it's really recommended that you're doing this work with a team, and some guiding questions just to kind of structure your conversation around. It is not meant to be something that you have to follow exactly. It's not meant to be something that administrators are going to hand you and say, you have to do this. Like, it's not a checklist, but it is a guide. And one thing I hope you will think of when you're looking at it is, how can this support me in what I'm already doing? How can this be a next step to make my PLT stronger? Not, oh my gosh, we have to do this. That is not what it's meant to be. So be thinking of which parts of this document could be most supportive to you and your PLT, or your PLTs in your school as you're leading those, and which parts are too much for right now and maybe will be great in the future, but not right at this moment. So you always want to start with PLTs where they are and give support. So please, again, this is a long document. It is not meant to be handed over and just do all of it. So I'm going to give you a minute to just click in there if you don't have it open already, and get that open so we can orient ourselves to the document and look at it a little bit. And let us know in the chat or unmute if you have any trouble getting it open. Okay, Jennifer, you can go on to the next slide, I think. All right, so what I want you to do now is just take about 5 minutes to read the purpose paragraph in this document and skim through the rest of the document, and be prepared to share out. I'm hoping to hear from as many people as possible today, just to kind of get us engaged at the end of the day. And I know that it's hard, but if we talk a little, hopefully that will help. So be prepared to share. I notice and I wonder about the document. We'll give you, like I said, I think about 5 minutes to read over it, and then I'll call you back together. Okay, I'm going to cut a little bit short just to shave off some time and get us moving along. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to wrap up looking at it and think about what you might share about a notice or a wonder. Okay, feel free to unmute, or if you're more comfortable raising your hand, you're welcome to do that. But tell us something that stood out to you, or some questions or thoughts you have about this document. It could be anything. Like, I noticed it was kind of long. I pointed that out earlier. So let's hear it.
I can share out. I noticed that for each type of assessment, I saw that my PLT, especially over the past 2 years, has done a lot of those questions naturally through conversation. Even though we didn't have those questions in front of us, a lot of our conversations went that direction. But I did wonder how we could make this more accessible, I guess, thought process wise, or beginning teachers who may not know to take their conversations this way. And it might be very overwhelming to look at all these questions and think, oh my God, I have to do all of this in a PLT. So I would really wonder about how to make it a little bit more accessible for PLT newbies.
That's a great comment. Thank you. Because one, I love to hear that you're doing that already naturally, and that you have a seasoned PLT. And it's a great point that you made, that their PLTs are on all different places, and some may have all brand new teachers, and this would be too overwhelming. So I think, as we've been doing professional learning with people coming, yeah, it's overwhelming. Thank you, Austin, for bringing that to the table. It can be overwhelming for anybody. We've been doing professional learning around this document with groups of people, all different, of all different elementary through high school, and everybody has kind of said different things about the document that stood out to them as this is great or this is too much. And what we're telling everybody is it's wonderful to just identify, where is your PLT? Like Lainey said, their PLT does this already. So they might be ready for like a structure of like a whole section of questions. Some other PLTs that are not doing this might just be ready to pull out a couple of questions and put those on their agenda every time. What it's about thinking about, we ask the participants when they leave to think about, what can you commit to regarding this database problem solving? And some of them are just saying, I'm committing to reading this more, or I'm committing to taking these 2 questions and bringing them and asking my team, can we ask these 2 questions every time? Or some people are just saying, I'm committing to trying to get our data into a format that we can look at it and really analyze it, because they're not there yet. Somebody just said in the chat, sorry, I'm trying to listen and keep up with the chat too, the equity audit questions. So some people are saying like, oh, that's a part, we do all the rest of this already, we don't really get to the equity audit part. So add that part in. So really thinking about, what can we take from this document and just build on what we're already doing. What can take us to a next step in our PLT? Absolutely don't think that it needs to be, we're doing all this every time. Some people also just say, we're going to do this with one assessment every quarter or something. We're going to do the full thing. There are all different ways to move your PLT to a next level of database problem solving. So I'm sorry I talked a lot on that comment. Any other notices or wonderings that you haven't gotten to share either in the chat or out loud?
I shared mine in the chat. So we had been talking about this in our PLT last week because we're doing the PLC Plus and social studies. We have a dual certified person, and they're like, we do pre-assessments of like our units, and and then it's like, well, we would love to do that, but what does a pre-assessment look like if we want them at some points to do like a cold read to see what they understand, or like, do you give them the same passage and ask the same exact questions? And like, so I'm just like curious of what a pre-assessment would look like for our content area.
Jennifer, do you want me to let you or Dina talk about that, or you want me to jump in?
Yeah, and just a clarifying question, Rebecca, are you asking about a pre-assessment different from the ones that we are providing this year? So
Well, I mean,
like we're doing the module pre-assessments, but you're looking at to break it up by unit?
there's a module pre-assessment of like in that like has, okay, maybe we missed those then. Okay, never mind.
You might. I'm thinking that you just information overload, but the work that we're doing with our crews this year with the new
Oh, yeah.
instructional resources. Um, there's a couple people on this call. I think Madeline and Adrian are just two of the content writers that have been making pre-assessments for each module. So they're a short, like 5 to 10 question, multiple choice. There's an optional written response, and those all align with the standards for that module. But an interesting idea that I thought you were bringing to the table was maybe breaking that up and doing like a pre-unit
Yeah.
assessment.
No, okay, I think I have seen one of those, but like I guess it's if it's a pre-assessment of that skill, but then you're testing that skill with a new passage, are you then essentially just testing their reading comprehension of a new passage, or is it really a pre-assessment? So I feel like sometimes with our content area, a pre-assessment isn't really like a pre-assessment unless it's like vocabulary, because it all depends on the way that you word the question, the answer choices, and the text that you have, because some texts aren't accessible for students. So I don't know. I love the idea of a pre-assessment, but I think it also just like challenges me to make like think about what that's actually going to look like beyond what like I have seen one of them, but they're not using the same text as the actual assessment. So
Yeah, you bring up a great point, Rebecca, and we're going to always elicit feedback from you. Always solicit feedback from you, but what we ultimately want is to assess kids on the skills, right? Not necessarily whatever the reading content is. So different conversation, different time, but certainly it's going to be had. Okay. So as always, we appreciate any feedback you guys give us. Thank you so much. Adrian, we're sorry for hijacking.
No, that's okay. I think it's a great comment, and I will say to Rebecca, it's difficult to write those. Like you're right, it's not easy. So yeah, I think that we could have a whole big conversation about that. I just love that you're thinking about it. That for me, that you're thinking about like how can we do this instead of going, oh, we can't do this. I love the way that you phrased it, so I'm good with that. Jennifer, do you want to tell them really quickly where to find it before we go on?
Yes, sure. They are linked in our newsletter, and you can find them on your Learning Central site. There's a 21-22 instructional resource button on the landing page. You click on that, and all of the resources that we've created this year are there. So we haven't had a ton of energy around the pre-assessments, so I'm glad we had this discussion. I know that y'all are using the digital slides and some of the other resources we've put out there in terms of scaffolding, but those pre-assessments are there for modules 1 and 2, and we're working on 3 and 4 currently.
All right, so let's go on to the next slide. And I am going to adjust a little bit, I think, again, because I want to honor your time. But what we do have for you, and you will have access to this, all of this to look at later if you want to, if you're trying, we have a model for you where we did a fishbowl. When we teach this in person, we actually have participants be part of a fishbowl, and we can't do that now that we're having to do things virtually. So we have, you'll see an amazing PLT in a minute in a video that is going through doing a mid-unit assessment. When I say doing, looking at mid-unit assessment data, following this database problem solving guide. So you're going to have a chance to watch just a little bit of that. We're going to shorten that, but you'll have access to the videos later if you want to go back and look at them. They star yours truly, and I apologize in advance. I'm like Jeremy. I cannot stand having to see myself on video. And when you look at the videos, I'm also on all of the thumbnails and everything. So it's just me everywhere. And I am so sorry. Believe me, it's way more painful for me than it is for you, hopefully. But you're going to watch a PLT, simulating a simulated PLT, going through looking at assessment data that we really took from, since we do this for all grade levels, we decided to go with 5th grade. So it's a 5th grade EL module 2 mid-unit assessment 2 data that we have. And it's not real student data, but it is the real data from the assessment. So this, if you see on the screen, this is one of the pieces of data that the teachers in this fishbowl activity will be using. And it is one way to look at data. And I know Jennifer and Dina shared with you a template for how you can put your data in this way, where you're looking at the assessment item number and you're looking to see which standard that item addresses, or standard. Sometimes you can see it's more than one. EL gives you this information, or all the resources, your assessments, you have this information. In the past, it was really difficult for teachers sometimes to figure out, here's an assessment, which standard am I assessing? So I think one celebration is now we're getting access to this information. You don't have to go and figure it out. We're doing that when we create the pre-assessments too. We're making sure that you know for each question which standard is being addressed. So it's easier to put your data in this format. You can say for item number 1.1a, we were doing standard RL 5.4. And then on the right side, we have in a group of 4 teachers, and that's about 30 students per teacher, so 120 students. 110 got the first question right, and 10 of them got it incorrect. This is just a basic item analysis that a PLT would have. Remember, this is 5th grade, so I know you have way more students than that, but they only have 30 students per class. So this is one way that they're looking at their data. And if Jennifer, if you can go to the next slide. The second way they're looking at their data is an overall student score with demographic data on there. So they would have their student names and then other demographic data about them, like gender, race, student with disability, AIG, all that kind of stuff. And then on the far right, you can't see it here. Well, they have the score for each student, and then they have attendance data, because that's also really important data about a student, is their attendance when you're looking at their achievement and how they're doing academically. So if you wanted to click into this, you could. You do not have to right now. Just knowing that that's the data that these teachers are going to be looking at is important. And what we're going to have you do, I'm going to stop for just a second, actually. I'm looking at the chat to see if there's anything I want to address. I think you were just talking about the pre-assessments. Does anybody have questions about the data, or why it's in the format that it's in, or there anything about those spreadsheets that Jennifer and Dina have shared with you?
And Adrian, I'm just going to jump in and suggest that we do this slide as part, and this segment might be part 1 of this discussion. And I think, so we don't rush it, we can take this on to our next meeting. Through, I think we need to do part 2 in the next meeting. So that way we can all get out of here on time.
I was going to shorten the videos, but that's fine. We'll do it this way, and then they can talk together next time. Okay, that works. Thank you, Jennifer. All right, so this will be hopefully just, you can kind of sit back and relax for the next few minutes, and just be thinking about, you've seen that guidance document. You might want to have it kind of up also on, on a tab, but you're going to watch this PLT go through a discussion, and they're looking at mid-unit data, and what do they talk about. And you'll notice that if you watched all 3 of these, which you don't have to today, they don't get through the whole conversation. They get through about half of a conversation, because they have about 25 minutes. And sometimes that's all you have in your PLT, with all the interruptions or all the other things that you have to do. So you can see that it's okay that they, start and stop, or, sometimes people come in and interrupt, and all those things happen, and it's completely okay. But what you're going to watch now is, if you are A through M, you don't have to go anywhere. You can just turn off your camera, sit there, and you're going to watch part 1 of this video series that I'm going to have you access in a minute. And if you're N through Z, you're going to watch parts 2 and 3. They're shorter. That's why you have 2 parts to watch. So basically, the first part is them going through the first few questions on the guidance document. And the second part, they pick up at talking about the equity, or third part is the equity questions, and the second part are the ones that are kind of in the middle. So what we want you to think about, thank you, Jennifer is dropping the playlist in the chat. That's all you'll click on, but be thinking about the gist of the conversation that you're going to listen to, and what goes well during that discussion. So you're looking at how are they using this guidance document to guide their conversation, and just think about what's the gist, so that you can share it back with the group, because when we come back. So again, if you're A through M, you're going to watch part 1. If you're N through Z, you're going to watch parts 2 and 3. And we'll come back in about 10 minutes and we'll talk about what you saw for just a minute, and there'll be time to go. All right. And I might call you back a little bit earlier, but you'll get as much watched as you can. So go ahead and click on the playlist and start watching and just enjoy. Okay, I know everybody's not had enough time to watch all the videos, but I think it's probably more valuable to get to talk for a minute and get you out of here on time. So if you can hear me and you're able to get to a stopping point and then just come back and drop a quick hi or ready in the chat so we can see that we have people back. Thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, there you are. You guys are on the spot. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. All right, so just with a very, very limited time that we have left, can somebody who watched a little bit of part one just tell us something you noticed, or what kind of impact was the conversation having, positive impact do you think it was having on the instruction or curriculum or environment of the teachers?
It was positive that they all had an opportunity to share their data, and that there was time given even for those that maybe weren't quite ready to talk about specific numbers yet.
Yes, I like that you said that. It wasn't like, it was kind of trying to keep it laid back so that, you know, people had a chance to look at their data. There wasn't a high expectation of you have to know exactly what you're going to say when you walk in, because that can be very stressful. Anything else about part one?
I noticed that the goals or expectations for student performance were shared before they started discussing the data, the results.
Yeah, so for those of you who didn't see it, they had a quick conversation. This is a question on the guide about what do we consider benchmark? And I think sometimes we assume that and don't really talk about it. But they had there was an interesting conversation about, so they give a mid-unit assessment. Do they expect students to be at 80%? Was that what they would consider a benchmark? Or they talked about maybe it's 75% because we're still at mid-unit and they're still doing some learning. So there's no right answer to that question, but it was interesting that conversation was there. Thank you, Jasmine. Anything from parts 2 or 3 that you wanted to point out, especially for people that didn't get to watch those parts? Something that stood out or that you thought was impactful?
The way they connected the absences with the students who did not do well. And
Yeah.
Once they connect that, then there needs to be a what do we do next?
Yeah, so for those of you who didn't see that part, that is when they're doing kind of the equity audit part of it, and they're trying to figure out who benefited and who did not. And so they're trying to find trends of which students did well, which students did not do well. And a trend they see is that the students, seems to be a correlation between students that have a lot of absences and students have lower scores. And they don't come up with an answer right away, but they do talk about how can we talk more about absences? Do we need to talk to the counselor? Do we need to pull some other people in? Is this a core, they're kind of looking at, is absence as a core issue, or is this something where we need some intervening with students? So thank you, Stephanie. And then Austin said in the chat that they focused on the positives and not just negatives. So there were a lot of things that they could celebrate. They celebrated that there was some good work being done with a special ed teacher and one of the teachers, and they could see some growth with the students. They were celebrating that it seemed like their school had put a lot of work into being culturally responsive, and that there didn't seem to be a divide. Race or ethnicity seemed to be kind of even in the scores, and they were really proud of that. Anything else that you wanted to point out? Okay, I see our time. I know our time is up. We are going to continue this conversation. I say I might hopefully be able to come back, but if not, Jennifer and Dina will continue the conversation and let you have some time to practice using this guidance document. But again, one thing I just hope you take away is I'd love for you right now to kind of in your mind give yourself a little next step now that you've seen this document and talked about it just a little bit. I know we just started touching on it. So is your next step going to be you're going to read it more thoroughly, you're going to watch the rest of the videos you didn't get to see, you're going to print it off, you're going to and put it somewhere in your room so maybe you'll see it and remember it, something, whatever, you're going to tell your PLT about it. So just kind of maybe commit to one step that, or maybe there's one question you're going to pull off of it and start incorporating in your PLT agendas. So hopefully you will, yes, you could share. Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. You're welcome to share the videos. I don't love it, but if it helps, I will sacrifice my embarrassment. Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. There also, and I hate this too because it's also me. There's also a video, and I might get Jennifer to share it with you if you want. Thank you, Dina. There's a video that explains this document and how it can be used with PLTs as well. And I might get that to Jennifer and get that shared with you, whatever would help. But more, I think what would help is to hear some feedback about what more do you need? What more support do you need to try to get some of this work, not the document, but the work of the problem solving to your PLTs. So please feel free to give that to Jennifer and Dina, and we'll talk about it more as we can. I'm going to turn it back over to Jennifer